Welcome to The Worthy Woman, a podcast for the intuitive, ambitious woman who's ready to regulate her nervous system, reconnect with her body, and rise to the next level of success, health, and purpose. I'm your host, Jo, manual osteopath, holistic coach, and nervous system guide, here to walk with you as you heal from the inside out and create a life and a business that actually feels good. On this podcast, we explore the connection between your body, emotions, subconscious patterns, and your ability to lead, create, and live from your worth. Let's get into today's episode. Hello, welcome back to another episode of The Worthy Woman. My name is Johanna if you are new here. And today I wanted to talk about how to know when you should be kind of going all in on your business, taking radical ownership for what is going on and, we'll say pushing or taking a lot of action and hustling versus, taking a rest and having more balance and, giving yourself grace and giving yourself this space to kind of, be so hard on yourself, basically. I was having a conversation with a fellow business owner, and they were talking about, there's some articles and some books where they talk about, you got to give everything all you got in business, and you have to take radical ownership and extreme ownership for the things that you do, because whether you fail or whether you succeed it's all on you, right? It's because of the actions that you're taking and the choices that you're making, right? But then on the flip side of it, you read other books that basically tell you to, kind of give yourself some grace and take a deep breath, and, they hear about, balance and this work-life balance, and so they hear those things and they're like, well, that doesn't really work the way that people think, especially in, this economy of the way the world is currently going, right? With all the chaos and everything that's going and the prices of things and all of this. And so the question was like, well, how do we, what are we supposed to do? Like, which one is it, right? And who do you believe, and how do you know which one it truly is the right answer? And so I thought this was a really interesting, perspective, and I feel like this is such an interesting topic, because this is where I feel like content and, putting yourself out there and making a name for yourself and having this line in the sand moment that marketers and everybody else tells you to have can create a little bit of confusion. Because in my world, obviously I preach and talk about the energetics of the nervous system and the energetic body and our subconscious mind and all of these sorts of things. And I think that when it comes to a question like this, where it's like, well, how do we know when to push hard and how do we know when to pull back? And what one is it? I think there's an underlying emotion that's going on there, which we'll get into, but there's this idea that comes across with both of these topics that it's all or nothing. It has to be all this way or it has to be all that way. And that's not how it works. It's kind of like the nervous system. There's our rest and there's our action, our sympathetic and our parasympathetic. It's not about one or the other being better. It's really about this balance and this dance. And the balance is the dance. The balance does not mean it's equal at all times. It's kind of like when we look at relationships or our jobs. Especially with jobs where we work with other people, we pick up the slack, right? We all kind of some days it's like in relationships, you might have a really good day and your husband or your wife might be having a really bad day. You kind of pick up and help them out where you can when they're having those days, and hopefully they do the vice versa for you, right? When you're having a bad day and they're doing okay, they'll pick up the slack on things, right? It's not about it being 50-50. We talk about things as this black and white, but it's really not about that. It's about, can you dance? Or are you so rigid that you're just no, it has to be this way, right? And if you are going to be rigid in your viewpoint, you're going to have a really hard time succeeding at all in anything in life, because life is not like that. But you're kind of missing the point. So I think the answer here is that it's both. But what I had said in response to this person was that there's nuance here, right? Because it's not, again, this black and white thing. We can hold ourselves accountable in a very healthy way, right? I think that's the key, healthy, where we aren't shaming ourselves for when things don't go as planned or when we might need a break and can't keep up, right? And the second you start to shame yourself and these negative, we'll say, these harsher feelings start to come out, that's when the fear kicks in. That's when this the negative mind, the doubts, the insecurities, all of those shadowy things start to come up to the surface. And then when that happens, your nervous system is usually totally out of whack at that point. And then that's when you know that you need to take a step back and take a break. In a perfect world, you're not getting to that point where you have to take a step back because you're in this crazy mind. But life's not perfect. And you hear people talk about it all the time. Even if people make millions of dollars, they're I still deal with imposter syndrome, right? I still deal with the, who am I, right? To do this or to create this, or can I really do this? Are people really going to buy this and whatever, right? And so I think that when these questions, these deeper questions come up, we have to ask ourselves, how do these things feel? And I know that's not necessarily a easy thing or a ideal way of maybe looking at business is from this emotional lens. But it's true, because the feelings, it's not that you need to act based on the feelings, but the feelings will tell you a story. And so if you are giving it all you got, taking radical, extreme ownership that it's all your fault and everything is on you, that's being very hard on yourself, right? How does that feel when you do that to yourself? And that'll show you how much grace you're giving yourself and how kind you're being to yourself. I think when we can take a step back, it allows us to reframe how we're looking at ourselves, how we're looking at our businesses, and kind of lets us course correct, right? We can get so caught up in the day-to-day grind of things that we kind of get lost in the sauce, so to speak, right? Where we get lost in this idea of, what happened yesterday bleeds into the next day and the next day after that and the day after that. And then next thing you know, there's weeks have gone by and you've just been miserable for weeks, right? So again, there's not this perfect answer of one or the other. It's both. And when we have all of this balance and this breath, and we give ourselves grace and we're really compassionate with ourselves, but we also have no ownership, you're not going to be successful there either. We can't have one without the other. If you have the ownership and you have the working hard and grinding, but you don't have any compassion for yourself and you don't give yourself any space, you're going to burn out and you're probably going to be very unhealthy and get sick and have to take a break from your business, right? So either end of the spectrum isn't necessarily good. So we have to be somewhere kind of in the middle. But it's not 50-50 in the middle. It fluctuates, right? You might have seasons where you're pushing really hard and you're pushing really hard, you're working really hard, and then you might have seasons where you can take a bit of a break and you can coast a little bit, or you're not launching, you're not having to sell as much, right? There's a lot of different fluctuations in our businesses that we have to learn how to ride the wave. Because when we don't learn how to ride the wave, it means your nervous system's not riding the wave. And it means your nervous system's not adapting. And emotionally, there's probably things coming up for you that are either rooted in past experiences and or there's a belief behind there that's probably blocking the flow and the abundance and the growth in your business or the ideas in your business that you really need to get yourself off this hamster wheel. Now, I don't believe business needs to be hard. There's a difference between things being hard versus how do I want to flip this? So I always think of it like there's a difference between simple and easy, right? Something can be simple, but it doesn't mean that it's easy, right? So it's like it sometimes might be challenging, but that doesn't mean it has to be like hard all the time, right? And I think that, again, there's nuance here of like, okay, well, is this just like a challenging moment that you have? Or are you constantly in an uphill battle with your business? Because that uphill battle means like something's not working, right? Whether it's me, whether it's the business itself, the way in which you're working, who you've got working for you, the efficiencies, right? Like there's so many things that could be going on in a business that determine whether it's flowing, we'll say, or not. I also believe that there is a big difference between men and women and how men can show up in their businesses versus how women can show up in their businesses. The model of business, and I feel like this is important to say because I obviously speak and work with female entrepreneurs, but men in business, our whole business model and business mindset has been created, a lot of times taught, by men. And there have been women who have been very successful by adopting this masculine view on business. But if you look at it, a lot of times they burn out, or they're not really living, we'll say, the soft life, right? So depending on what you prioritize and what you value in your life, right? If you value, being with your children and having downtime and these sorts of things, that doesn't necessarily come with this like boss babe, CEO, hustle culture mentality, right? I think a lot of women are also realizing that it's not sustainable, right? You see a lot of women online who are, and I think this is where technology is a blessing because it's helping women show up in a way and create these massive businesses and create massive success without having to like burn themselves out in the process. And so there gets to be more of this balance, right? They get to work hard, they get to put in the effort, they get to take responsibility, take ownership, schedule out their time, schedule out their hours to work, and then they get to step away. And unfortunately, depending on the industry and the business model and how you work, that may or may not be possible for you. This is why the online world has become so popular, because people see flexibility. People see potential. When you work in a service-based business, it gets really hard to leverage yourself. And I know I see this, right? Like with my clinic can only ever bring me so much because it's based on my time and my energy and my willingness to give up my time and my energy for clients outside of other things in my life, right? And it's all based on what you value. I always say, like, some people love, so if I take my clinic world, it's like there's this, a lot of people work, 40 hours a week in a clinic. They treat, we'll say 8 clients a day for 5 days a week, the standard process. And I have always said, I look at some people's like client lists, we'll say, or like their schedules more so, and I see those days and those hours, and it just makes me want to cry. Like I just want to curl up in a ball and hide. I'm like, if that was my schedule, I would be so unhappy. And I love what I do, but that time and that energy is so, I'm realizing how precious that time and energy is for me because one, it affects how I show up in my treatments, right? So what people don't realize potentially as a client is that like, I don't treat as much because I know that if I didn't treat, I would be miserable, or like if I did treat all the time, I would be miserable doing that, which means you're not going to get as nice of a treatment or as good of a treatment. It could be better, right? If I'm rested and I'm in this good space, I'm going to be able to show up more as the person and the practitioner that I want to be and need to be for my clients. And it's something that's so different than, customer service is always important, but I think in my world, dealing with, people individually, one-to-one for, hours and weeks at a time, it's more than just customer service. Like I I am giving them my time and my energy and my compassion and my empathy and my knowledge. I'm giving so much more than just, customer service that you would get at a coffee shop, right? And so there's a difference depending on the industry that you're in of how you show up and how you work with your clients. Like if you're in the coaching industry, it's the same thing. You have to show up. People are looking at to you to be a rock, to have guidance, to have the support, to have the answers. And you got to be on your A game. And if you're running around ragged and not giving yourself that time and space, then you're going to burn yourself out. And this is how people end up in burnout, is because they don't have this dance. They don't have this balance. I don't work nearly as many hours, we'll say, like time for money hours, as some people do. But that doesn't mean I don't work hard. I work very hard, and I'm constantly working just on other things, right? And so I think there's that piece too, is like, well, what does it mean to work hard and take ownership? Are we equating time with money? And is that an old mentality that maybe needs to be reframed? Right? Like it is the reality of some people's businesses where it's like, okay, well, yeah, like you are a service-based business. You do trade time for money. Is there a way you can leverage yourself? Is there a way that you can, kind of come out of this? Some people do get kind of caught in a pickle where it's like their business is only so big. And so it's like, how do I expand? I need more money to expand, but I can only expand, like I can only make more money by expanding. Like you get caught in that little vicious cycle. But these feelings and these like, I don't really understand this. Like, what should I do? Which one's the answer? The answer is neither. The answer is both. The answer is, how does it feel for you? Right? Like, how do you feel in your business right now? Do you feel like you are, taking all this ownership and really working hard and pushing and grinding and feel like, oh my God, I wish I just had like a breath of fresh air. I wish I just had a moment to pause. And this doesn't just have to be in your business, but even just in your life. Is there an imbalance between your business and your family life? Is there an imbalance between your business and your social life and your family life? Like, where is the break? Where is the rest? It doesn't have to mean that you have to take time away from your business, but you might need to carve out space in your life, just in your life. Whether that's with your family, you might need more alone time. You might need social, like friendship time without children around. You might need less hours maybe in your day, your work day, right, to make that work. You might need to delegate. So this is where I kind of say, like, there is this nervous system, this energetic, this subconscious work, but it's a lifestyle. Like, you got to be willing to make changes in your life and your business. And I think this is where a lot of people don't want to do this work, because they're like, there's the risk, we'll say, that the stepping away, the creating space, well, if I change this, there's no guarantee. And this could backfire. Right? So a lot of people are afraid of change. And so if we're afraid of change, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. But if you're afraid of change as a business owner, you're going to stay stuck, and you're going to have to hit a rock bottom somewhere probably before you make change. And even then, some people still resist it. And I think that this conversation, as much as the question is like, well, which one? Do I have rest or do I push harder and keep going? It can sound very surface level, but it's a very deep, deep question. And I think if you're somebody who's questioning this, you're going to have to do a lot of exploration. You're going to have to do, and this is something that I've continued to do, because I never really subscribed to the 40-hour work week. And like, I did work a lot. And at one point I was working with a hockey team part-time. I was working full-time. I was in school full-time. Like, I was busy. I had 14-hour days. But they weren't all income producing activities, right? And so I still had to struggle with, well, how do I do the things that I love? How do I run a business and still make money to survive, right? And, I was on the flip side of it where I wasn't, from an earlier age, we'll say, or earlier on in my journey, I was less willing to compromise my time and my energy for just to make a quick buck. Like I never, but then I struggled with the finances, right? And some people do okay with the finances, but they struggle with the time and the energy and their health and their overall well-being and happiness. And I think this is where the business entrepreneur journey becomes really challenging for people. It becomes very unenjoyable, and this is where people quit. Or they keep going the way they're going and they end up with health problems, life problems, marital problems, what have you, right? So it's a very deep question. And if you're like, well, I can't take time away, like, how do you create balance? What is balance? I encourage you, if you are like, I have to give everything I got to my business and I'm not willing to not work hard, which again, what is working hard? Is it time? Is it energy? Is it money? Is it like, what is, define what working hard means to you? Is it a certain amount of hours a week? Like, what does that mean? Right? Because someone can work hard for 2 hours and someone could, quote unquote, work hard for 8 hours because that's the time they were at work. And we're going to get into this topic in a few weeks of like busyness versus productivity. But just because you worked for 2 hours, or because you worked 8 hours, doesn't mean your work is more or less valuable, or that you couldn't have gotten what you did in 8 hours done in 2 hours, right? So my challenge to you is, if you're in this space of like, I have so much on my plate, whether it's, your business or your business and your family life and your personal life, or, your personal life is so busy it takes away from your business, or maybe you're trying to build a side hustle, whatever. My question and my encouragement to you and my invitation to you is to look at, how can I carve out 5 to 15 minutes to be by myself, to not be on my phone, but to either read a book, listen to something, stretch, move your body, have a cup of coffee and just sit with yourself. How can you be a little bit more present in your day and ask yourself maybe what you need in that moment, right? Ask yourself what you need more in your life. Do you need alone time? Do you need quiet time? Do you need or want space to learn something? Do you need to really get your health back on track, and so you want to move your body? Or maybe you need 15 minutes in the morning to make a lunch. Give yourself 5 to 15 minutes and start small, right? Give yourself a small moment to have the grace. Give yourself the deep breath. Give yourself the break. Have that space to give yourself balance in that moment. And I can guarantee you that is going to start to balance out, we'll say, the aspect of like the working hard, the taking ownership, the taking action in your business that doing things that need to get done, right? That is what's going to give you more of that balance that you're maybe craving and looking for, that sounds good in theory, but you're like, how the heck do I implement it? It's by starting small. And maybe it's not every day. Maybe it's like a week, like once a week you do this, right? Maybe it's like a Sunday morning or a Sunday evening, and you give yourself 5 to 15 minutes to sit down, organize for your week. Like what are those little things in those little pockets of your day that you can do? Because a lot of us use those pockets of our day to scroll and to detach and to numb out. And those could be used more intentionally. I mean, there's some in a place where we all want to do that, right? But we can use some of these moments more intentionally to take ownership of giving yourself grace and rest and balance. I think we forget that in order to incorporate rest and balance and space, that takes extreme ownership as well. But it's extreme ownership outside of your business. It's extreme ownership when it comes to your health. It's extreme ownership when it comes to your relationships. It's extreme ownership when it comes to the different layers of health, right? Mentally, physically, emotionally. So everything in life is extreme ownership. It depends where you're going to place it. And that comes down to your priorities and what you deem the most valuable or the season of life that you're in. So that was a very long talk. A little bit more of like me just kind of like talking about the that whole my viewpoint on that. So hopefully that all made sense. There's like, I could talk about this, I feel like, for hours. But if you're in this place where you're wanting to grow your business, but also not wanting to burn yourself out, or you've already been there in the burnout, you have to really ask yourself if you're willing to make change. And if you're really willing and ready to open yourself up to change. Because again, that's where we a lot of times keep ourselves stuck, is we're not willing to actually change the things that need to shift, because there's fear and there's the unknown, and we have to be willing to step into that. And by doing subconscious work, energetic work, nervous system work, stepping into the unknown becomes less scary, less intimidating, because we know and we trust in ourselves a little bit more, because we've got a handle on ourselves. So I hope this makes sense for you guys. Thank you for being here, listening to my TED Talk. But yeah, I feel like I could really dive into that ownership topic a lot, because that's very interesting. Again, multi-layered, a lot of depth there. And I think that's where, again, I'm going back to the content piece of just like, books and topics and, social media pieces you see online. They're so focused on creating an opinion that it misses the other side of things, right? Because that just wouldn't grab people's attention. So we have to be able to read these things and take in our own perspective and realize that there is another side. It's not all black and white. And no one is really right and no one's really wrong. Everyone's right and everyone's wrong, So anyway, that is today's episode. Thank you for being here, as always. I hope this was helpful for you. Again, a little bit longer, but yeah, I hope it was valuable for you. And I will be back next week with another episode. Make sure you guys are following on my Substack. I will leave the link for that below, but I have been uploading these to Substack, and so which means basically you get that right to your inbox. So, and plus my other things that I post on YouTube. So if you're building a business and you're interested in this kind of work and like learning from me, hearing all these crazy things that I have to say, make sure you subscribe to my Substack, because it's going to give you the updates of when all these things come out, which just helps because things can kind of get lost in the interweb. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.